Let me ask you something. Have you ever stared at a rejection email or worse, complete silence and thought to yourself, is this about me? Is it about my resume, my age, where I live, the way I speak, my background, too much experience, not enough? At some point in a long job search, almost everyone reaches a moment where it stops feeling professional and starts feeling personal. And here's the dangerous part. When the job search feels personal, your confidence starts to erode, your thinking gets distorted, and you begin making decisions based on fear instead of strategy. So today, I want to do something very specific. I want to help you separate structural rejection from personal failure, because those are not the same thing, even though they feel the same. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the hiring process creates emotional pain even when no one intends it, what's actually happening behind the scenes, and how to protect your confidence while staying competitive in a brutal market. Because here's the truth, most people never hear. You don't lose when you get rejected, you lose when you internalize it. If you're a seasoned professional navigating today's hiring market and you want clarity instead of confusion, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. This channel exists to help you stay grounded, strategic, and confident when the process tries to do the opposite. Before we go any further, I want to slow this conversation down, because this is one of those topics where misunderstanding the system can quietly do real damage to your confidence. Most people assume that if a job search starts feeling personal, it must be because something is wrong with them. Their resume, their age, their background, the way they speak, too much experience, not enough experience, like I mentioned. But what's actually happening is far more structural than most candidates realize. And I know this because I've seen this process from both sides. I've spent years working inside and alongside hiring processes, sitting in recruiter debriefs, hiring manager conversations, and decision meetings where candidates were discussed in ways they will never hear about directly. And at the same time, I now work closely with experienced professionals, directors, VPs, executives, and senior leaders who are navigating high-stakes interviews, leadership transitions, and nonlinear career paths, where how you tell your story matters just as much as what's on paper. If we haven't met yet, my name is Chuks Agada. Most people know me as Dr. A. Through my work in career calibration, I've helped seasoned professionals move through hiring processes with clarity, even when their career timelines didn't look perfect. Gaps, pivots, lateral moves, long tenures, rejections that didn't make sense. And here's the key insight I want you to hear clearly. Most hiring decisions are not personal, but the system itself is impersonal in a way that feels deeply personal to the person experiencing it. That distinction matters because when candidates don't understand how the system actually works, they start internalizing outcomes they never truly controlled. And that's when confidence erodes. That's when narratives distort. That's when the job search becomes emotionally exhausting instead of strategically manageable. So in this video, we're going to pull this apart calmly, clearly, and honestly, so you can stop blaming yourself for structural dynamics that were never about you in the first place. Here's the first thing you need to understand, and this alone will bring a lot of relief if you let it sink in. The hiring process is structurally lopsided. It's asymmetrical by design. You're entering this process with emotional investment. The organization is entering it with operational intent. Those two things are not equal. When you apply for a role, you're not just submitting a resume. You're submitting your time, your energy, your hope, your identity, and for many people, your sense of stability. For you, this role might represent progress or relief or security or validation or the next chapter of your career. So when something doesn't work out, it doesn't just feel like a professional outcome, it lands emotionally. Now, contrast that with what's happening on the other side, from the company's perspective. This is a filtering exercise. They're thinking in terms of value, timelines, approvals, risk, headcount, and internal alignment. They're managing dozens, sometimes hundreds of candidates at once. And that difference in perspective matters. Because while you are thinking this role could change my life, they are thinking we need to narrow this down. Not because they don't care, not because you weren't qualified, but because the system requires elimination before selection. And here's where things really start to hurt. The hiring system is designed to remove people quietly. Silence, generic rejection emails, automated messages, no explanation. There is no emotional closure built into the process. So your brain does what it always does when it lacks information. It fills in the gaps. And the story it fills in is usually this: it must be something about me. But most of the time, what you're experiencing isn't personal rejection. It's structural rejection. A system doing what it was built to do without regard for how it feels on the receiving end. That doesn't make it painless, and it doesn't mean that your feelings are wrong. It just means the pain isn't evidence of failure. It's evidence of misalignment between human emotion and institutional process. And once you understand that, you stop turning every rejection into a verdict on your worth. You start seeing it for what it is: a system making decisions imperfectly, quickly, and often without context in a market that is far more competitive than most people realize. This is where most job seekers get stuck, and where the emotional weight of the search quietly becomes overwhelming. They begin to confuse structural rejection with personal failure. And on the surface, those two things can feel identical. You apply, you interview, you prepare, you show up, and then nothing. Or a short message that says, "We've decided to move forward with another candidate." No explanation, no context, no insight. So your mind tries to make sense of it. And when the process doesn't give you clarity, your brain looks inward. What did I do wrong? What am I missing? What do they see that I don't? But here's the truth most candidates never get to hear. Structural rejection is not a judgment of your value. It is the byproduct of a system that is forced to reduce complexity into a binary decision: yes or no, move forward or no. And that reduction hides how close the decision actually was. Because in many cases, the difference between the person who gets the offer and the person who doesn't is incredibly thin. One additional year in a specific tool, experience in a narrowly defined industry, prior exposure to a particular type of client, or even familiarity with an internal system. Sometimes it comes down to timing. One candidate interviewed earlier, one candidate already knew someone internally, one candidate fit a gap on the team that had nothing to do with skill level. But none of that shows up in the rejection. So instead, candidates interpret the outcome as a verdict. I wasn't good enough. There must be something wrong with me. I keep getting close, but never chosen. And that's where the damage happens, because once rejection becomes personal failure, confidence starts to erode. People begin questioning their experience, minimizing their accomplishments, second-guessing how they speak or show up, overanalyzing every interview response. Not because the data supports it, but because uncertainty breeds self-blame. And the longer the search goes on, the louder that internal narrative becomes. What I want you to understand is this: if you're getting interviews, this system is already telling you something. It's telling you that you are viable. If you're making it to later rounds, it's telling you that you belong in the room. The fact that you didn't get that role does not invalidate that signal. It simply means that in that specific moment, under specific conditions, someone else edged you out. And that is not the same thing as failing. Failure is stopping. Failure is internalizing distortion. Failure is letting a structural outcome rewrite your identity. Rejection, on the other hand, is information. Incomplete, frustrating information, but information nonetheless. And when you learn to separate what the system is doing from what you believe about yourself, you regain control. You stop personalizing outcomes you never truly controlled. And that shift alone can change how you show up in every conversation that follows. Now I want to talk about something carefully and honestly, because if I didn't, this conversation would feel incomplete. Most hiring decisions are not personal, but sometimes they are. And I know that because I've been in the room when those decisions were made. I've sat in recruiter debriefs and hiring manager meetings where the conversation didn't revolve around skills, credentials, or qualifications, at least not entirely. Let me give you a realistic picture of what those rooms can sound like. A candidate finishes interviews. On paper, they're strong, experience checks out, interview performance was solid, and then someone says something like this: "I don't know. they just didn't feel like a long-term fit, or I can't put my finger on it, but something felt off. Sometimes it's even more blunt. I once heard a hiring manager say they didn't want to move forward with a candidate because just by looking at them, they felt the person was on their retirement leg and they wanted someone who would be with the company longer. In another case, a leader dismissed a candidate before even speaking to them because they didn't like the person's LinkedIn photo. The suit color felt outdated, the glasses looked old-fashioned, and they made assumptions from that alone. These are extreme examples, but they're real. And here's the part that matters most for you as a job seeker. You will almost never be told this, not because employers are trying to deceive you, but because transparency creates risk. Legal risk, HR risk, brand risk. So instead, the feedback gets softened or generalized or withheld entirely. You get a polite rejection or silence. And from the outside, it feels cruel. It feels confusing. It feels personal, but it was in a way, but not in the way your mind assumes. It wasn't a judgment of your worth. It wasn't a verdict on your competence. It wasn't proof that something is wrong with you. It was a subjective human preference operating inside of a system that pretends to be objective. And that distinction is critical because when candidates don't know this, they start searching for the wrong lessons. They assume, I need to sound different. I should tone myself down. I need to hide parts of my experience. Maybe I shouldn't be myself in interviews. And that's where the real damage happens because the goal was never to be liked by every employer. The goal was always to find alignment. Fit is real, chemistry is real, subjectivity is real. And none of that is something you can or should contort yourself to control. What you can control is this: showing up grounded, clear on your value, honest about who you are and how you operate, because when rejection is based on subjective fit, the right response is not self-erasure, it's redirection. And once you understand that, you stop chasing approval and start preserving confidence. So if any of this is resonating with you, do me a favor and tap that like button. It really helps this video reach other professionals who need this perspective, especially people who are quietly internalizing rejection and blaming themselves for things that they don't fully control. And let me ask you this question. When your job search starts feeling personal, what's the part that hits you the hardest? Is it the silence after applying, the interviews that don't turn into offers, or the not knowing why you weren't chosen? Drop your answer in the comments. I assure you, you're not the only one experiencing this, even if it feels isolating in the moment. This is where the job search quietly becomes most dangerous and most exhausting, not because of rejection itself, but because of what rejection slowly convinces you to do. When a search drags on long enough and outcomes don't make sense, people don't usually quit outright. They start changing themselves in subtle ways, and they often don't realize it's happening. Here are some of the patterns I see over and over again. One is over-editing. Candidates start watering down their experience. They remove leadership language. They soften their accomplishments. They downplay scope, budget, or influence, not because it's untrue, but because they're afraid of being too much. Another pattern is overperforming. People stop having conversations and start giving performances. Every answer feels rehearsed. Every response feels calculated. They're trying to say the right thing instead of the honest thing. And that creates distance because authenticity gets replaced by anxiety. Another pattern is hyper-interpretation. A neutral interviewer becomes a negative signal. A short response becomes rejection. A delayed follow-up becomes a verdict. Suddenly, every interaction is evidence that something is wrong. And then there's self-erasure. This one is the most damaging. People start hiding their opinions, their leadership style, their preferences, their boundaries. They convince themselves that if they just become more neutral, more agreeable, more flexible, they'll finally get picked. But what they're really doing is disconnecting from their own value. And here's the irony. These behaviors don't increase your chances. They actually reduce them because confidence isn't loud, but it's felt. And when you're second guessing yourself, it shows, not in obvious ways, but in tone, posture, pacing, and presence. The goal of the hiring process was never to be flawless. It was to be clear. Clear about who you are, clear about how you operate, clear about the value you bring. When rejection leads you to abandon that clarity, the process starts to work against you. So if you take nothing else from this section, take this. Rejection becomes truly harmful only when it changes how you see yourself. Your job is not to confront yourself into someone else's idea of hireable. Your job is to remain grounded, honest, and aligned, even when the system tests you. That's not easy, but it's how you protect your confidence while staying in the game long enough to win. Or to leave you with something grounding, especially if your job search has been testing you lately. If the process has started to feel personal, that doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human. Work is tied to identity, stability, purpose, security. So when the process is silent, dismissive, or confusing, it naturally hits deeper than people admit. But here's what I want you to hold on to. Your value did not disappear because of a hiring cycle. You have already been validated by the market. You've been hired before, you've solved real problems, you've delivered results in environments that require trust, skill, and leadership. That evidence still exists, even when the market feels cold. Today's hiring landscape is noisy, it's competitive, it's imperfect. Decisions are made quickly, often subjectively, often without full context. And that can make strong professionals question themselves in ways they never had to before. But rejection is not a verdict. It's a moment in a process that doesn't always reward the best person, but the best fit in that moment. Your job is not to shrink, not to perform, not to erase parts of yourself to become more palatable. Your job is to stay grounded, to continue telling your story with clarity, to show up honestly, to protect your confidence while staying engaged. Because here's the truth most people don't say out loud. You don't lose when you get rejected. You lose when you stop moving. You lose when you let the process convince you that something is fundamentally wrong with you. But if you stay in motion, thoughtfully, strategically, and aligned, the market eventually responds. It always has. It may take longer than you expected. It may test you more than you planned. But if you don't quit, you don't lose. You win by staying. If you're currently navigating a career transition, we'd love to see if we can help. Check out our website at careercalibration.co. I will provide a link in the description below. I look forward to meeting you there. Also, would you like expert job search advice delivered weekly into your inbox? Sign up to join our exclusive email list. Get exclusive insights designed to help you land your next role. Sign up today by clicking on the link below and take control of your job search. If this conversation helped you steady yourself even a little, I want you to watch the next video on your screen. It builds directly on what we talked about today. And finally, if you like this video, be sure to subscribe, like, comment below. See you next time. Over and out.